we're going to start out with a little bit of a background and an introduction to the Appellate Division Court for those of you who may not be familiar. And then I will provide a brief introduction for Judge Acosta. I have a few questions prepared to start and facilitate our discussion. And then I'll open it up to the students. Okay, ready? Fantastic.
Sure.
So the Appellate Division, which is located not too far from Baruch College, it's about 2 blocks away, was created by the New York State Constitution in 1894. The Appellate Division of the Supreme Court First Judicial Department is one of 4 intermediate appellate courts in the state and holds jurisdiction over the counties of New York and the Bronx. Appeals are taken to the Appellate Division in civil and criminal cases from the Supreme Court, Surrogates Court, Family Court, and Court of Claims. As a branch of the Supreme Court, the Appellate Division has broad powers to review questions of law and fact and to make new findings of fact. Over 3,000 appeals, 6,000 motions, and 1,000 interim applications are determined each year. The Appellate Division admits roughly 3,000 new attorneys to the bar each year. Presiding Justice Acosta has been the presiding justice of the New York State Supreme Court Appellate Division First Department since May of 2017. During his tenure, the court has modernized its system. Justice Acosta serves as the New York City Bar Association's Council on the Profession and the New York State Bar Association's Task Force on Free Expression in the Digital Age. He is also a fellow of the New York Bar Foundation and a proud graduate of Columbia College and Columbia Law School. He is the recipient of Columbia University's Medal of Excellence and the Prize for Social Responsibility. In 2008, he was inducted into the Columbia University Athletics Hall of Fame, and he currently serves as a trustee of Columbia University and as a member of the Dean's Council of Columbia Law School. And it's my pleasure to welcome today Judge Acosta. So I have a few questions to facilitate our discussion. And as I mentioned before, I'd love to open it up to the students' questions afterwards as well. So I thought we would start with what I think is your prior career. And if you could tell us a little bit more about why you were inducted into Columbia University's Athletic Hall of Fame.
Well, I was a pitcher for Columbia. Let me just tell you a little bit of background about me. I mean, I came from the Dominican Republic at the age of 14 and went straight into high school. So I graduated from DeWitt Clinton High School in the Bronx, where I was a baseball pitcher. You know, as most Dominicans, we do it well. we have a stay in the island. You know, there's baseball and then there's church and then that's it. so I did well. I mean, I graduated at the top of my class at DeWitt Clinton, a class of over 1,000 students. But I also played baseball. So I was drafted by the Cincinnati Reds and had choices to make about whether I was going to go to school or whether I was going to play professional baseball. Upon my father's advice, I decided a degree from an Ivy League school is a lot more long-lasting than a baseball career, which sometimes tends to last a little less time. So I played for Columbia, where I was able to be successful both on the field and off the field. I graduated cum laude from Columbia College, and but I also played baseball. So in the baseball team, I basically I still have Columbia's career wins, season wins. I had a bunch of other records. I broke all kinds of Ivy League baseball records. But what was important to me was also the fact that upon graduation, I was named the best student athlete in the country by the NCAA. So to me, that combination of both athletics as well as well as academics is really what did it for me. So that's where, of course, Columbia. I later became went to the law school, then later became an alum and did a lot of different work at Columbia. I have been a trustee of the university for the last 13 years.
Mhm.
So, um,
So what led you to decide on a career in law, Judge?
well, I thought that becoming a lawyer was a lot more long-lasting and impacting than being a baseball player. Not that a baseball player cannot be successful. Certainly, a baseball player can, will have enough money, will have enough influence to be able to also impact people's lives. I thought that I was more equipped to do that through a long-lasting career in the law. I always thought of the law as, particularly in our society, as sort of governing so much of our lives, uh, so much of what we do in the legal profession has consequence. I looked as a youngster. I looked at, the president is a lawyer, the legislature are all lawyers, the judiciary are all lawyers. It seems like lawyers permeate our entire society. So you can actually use the law to change people's lives, to impact people's lives. So I thought, this is something that has meaning for me. It's something that I wanted to do. I learned to do, public interest work, even while in college, even while in high school. It's something that I learned from my parents, both of who did some level of activism. My father doing union work for the drivers union in the Dominican Republic.
So, Judge, graduating from law school, you don't automatically become a judge. Could you tell us a little bit about your career as a recent graduate of law school?
Uh, as a recent graduate of law
Yes,
school.
take us way back.
Oh wow. Um, so repeat the question for me, please.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is once you graduated law school, what did you do? What was your path to becoming a judge?
Right. See, originally, becoming a judge is not something that you say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to become a
Right.
judge, so let me do all of these things," because the judicial world is comprised of so many different people from so many different backgrounds that is very, you can't just say, "Okay, I'm going to be a judge, and this is what I'm going to do in order to do it." For me, it was more I, the things that I want to do. I want to be a public interest lawyer. So I wound up starting at the Legal Aid Society in the South Bronx office. That was
Mm-hmm.
the office that actually helped my family when we immigrated. We encountered some difficulties, and I decided, I want to work in that office, and I want to help other people that come to that office in the same way that office helped my family. We were getting evicted. I don't want to go through the whole thing,
Right.
but we were basically dealing with the consequences of poverty and my father having lost his job. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I, it's become clear that I didn't come from wealth. Both of my parents are working class folks, and as an immigrant, it was sort of tough making ends meet. So when I chose my career and what I wanted to do as a public interest lawyer, it's just not something that interests me, but it was also something that I thought I can use to change other people's life. I did that for 7 years,
Right.
um, and then basically after suing the city of New York, uh, the dealing with a lot of the folks there, including Jeremy Travis, who was the president of John Jay. He was an advisor to then Mayor Koch. So I became, I became the head of the Human Rights Commission, in charge of law enforcement, dealt with a series of. Remember, this is Howard Beach, Benson Hertz, a lot of those, you know, bias incidents, racial incidents that you hear about in the books. Well, I was actually involved in the process through my work at the Human Rights Commission, and it was then after 4 years of working in the Koch administration, and then 4 years with the Dinkins administration, that I decided, what do I want to do? I decided to come back to legal aid to be the attorney in charge of the largest civil trial office in Brooklyn, because that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to continue to engage in litigation. And I was told, when are you going to apply to be a judge? And it had not even occurred to me at that time. I said, well, I started looking into what does a judge do. I mean, as a litigator, part of what I do, as in every lawyer going before court, what you do is you ask the court to do the right thing. You want the court to do justice. Well, I can be the judge that they ask for justice, and then I can make those decisions myself. So to me, as a judge, I saw a position of a lot of power, a lot of ability to achieve justice. So I went for it. I got a lot of support as a civil court, running for civil court judgeship in Manhattan, then got to Supreme Court trial level. Then I created the Harlem Community Justice Center back then to deal with it's a problem-solving court that deals with youth. And I thought that a lot of young people were entering the legal system, and the legal system, at least the traditional one, was not really doing well by them. That by the time that we got to the issues that brought that young person to the court, that person has already committed other acts that may wind up getting them back in. So I thought if we make if we resolve the issue at the front end, if we put resources in at the front end, and deal with community members, deal with psychologists, dealing with sort of the underlying reasons why that individual, what is affecting that young person, that young person feels that they can go ahead and commit an assault of an elderly person, or do things that they should not be doing. I mean, what leads somebody to do that? So that's something that court is equipped to do. We have psychologists in place. We had pastors from the community, all the stakeholders that will work with me and that young group of young people, and see, like, what sort of led to where you are. And I think we did pretty well in resolving a lot of the underlying issues that person brought to the courthouse. So that's when I was in Supreme Court and became trial level, then became an appellate judge. I mean, I've always sort of succeeded anywhere that I enter. I sort of have the immigrant work ethic. Just you work hard at it. I wasn't necessarily the smartest guy in the town, but smart enough and hardworking enough to make it work for me. So.
Fantastic. So a couple of questions regarding what's going on now with COVID. And I was wondering how hearing cases in the appellate division has changed with this virus.
Yeah, it has changed completely. I mean, one of the things that you said in my introduction was that that I have modernized the systems. I became presiding justice of the court back in May of 2017. In May of 2017, the first thing that I did that summer was to change all of the servers and begin live streaming of oral arguments. I thought, as a public interest lawyer and as someone who believes in the rule of law, that there should be transparency, that everything that we do should be seen by the public. I cannot, as you know, we have this fancy courthouse that's called the preeminent intermediate appellate court in the country. And it's a beautiful courthouse. I'm sorry, you folks what I recommend that you do is go to our website and look at the photos of the
Mhm.
courthouse because it's beautiful. It was built in late 1894, I believe, and the most opulent courthouse that you've seen. Is gorgeous. So the problem is that it can be an ivory tower, and folks like in my family had never seen it. In fact, I became a lawyer and I had not seen the courthouse until I was actually admitted. We also admit the lawyers that are admitted to practice law. So I make that decision with my character and fitness committee. So it's a
Right.
powerful court. We discipline all of the lawyers. We also admit all of the lawyers
Mhm.
uh, in the first department. So it's an important function. So I needed to modernize, and that's what I did. Again, change all of the service, build all of the systems virtually, so that we can, create what's called an impact, which is a case management system. I don't want to get too complicated, but it's a case management system that allows me to get instant electronic reports on
Mhm.
how we are doing, how things are working. I can access case information without, in the past, I would ask my clerk, Susana, can you get me a report on like how many cases, how many criminal cases were filed versus civil versus family cases. And it would take like weeks because they actually had to go manually and
Right.
tally those cases. I
Mhm.
mean, we were still in the 1800s. I changed that. So everything we do is electronic. I could generate a management report so I know how many cases are pending right now, etc. So on top of all of that, so basically when the pandemic came in, like when we were talking in March, February and March,
Right.
I already had robust systems in
Mhm.
place. So what I was able, of course, I had to create new systems in order to do things virtually. So we now, instead of doing oral arguments when persons come in or congregate in my courtroom, 100 people, 200 people, we can't do
Right.
that anymore. So we had to do this virtually, which
Yes.
is what I did. I created an entirely virtual process. So now lawyers, in fact, you should go to my website and look at the archives for the March cases.
Mhm.
Uh, Interesting, on May 12th, you have the election cases. So it's interesting, whatever neighborhood you're in, Bronx, Manhattan, you will know all of the election cases that are being contested. So I had to, so we heard all of those arguments virtually through
Yes.
Skype. So that's what I do, and you'll be able to see that in our website. So for me, it has been a great thing. I have not gotten, there hasn't been a single person at the appellate division who has tested positive for the virus.
Oh,
Very
fantastic.
proud of that, and that
Yeah.
includes my judges because early on I realized, we can do our work virtually. Why
Right.
am I going to take risks and put
Right.
people in the courthouse and lawyers in the courthouse? Because the problem is you can't really test. You know,
Mhm.
a lot of people say you can get temperature and all of that. The
Right.
reality is you congregate more than
Mhm.
10, 20 people, and you're running a big risk. You can't even isolate or socially distance on the bench. Our bench
Right.
is five, if you look at the bench, is five uh, seats that are very close to each other.
Yes.
So we can't even keep them 6 feet apart. So we've been doing that. In fact, for the month of June, we're also going to be virtual. I'm not
Uh-huh.
ready to come back and get my staff and judges to come back. We are doing everything. Yeah, in fact, we are more productive now. I
Right.
mean, I'm down to like 7 pending cases, which is the most productive court in the state. So we have no backlog to speak about. I mean, things are going to get a little hairy because the governor hasn't appointed judges in 3 years.
Right.
So we down 5 vacancies. So that's going to begin to have consequences unless he makes decisions and appoint uh, 5 vacancies, soon to be 6 in July. So
Mhm.
um,
Okay,
we've been doing well. You know,
so
the
there are some
court,
job
I work for the court.
opportunities. So there are some job opportunities there, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, the heroes in my court, you would think are the judges, but the heroes in my court are the clerk staff that has dealt with all the interim application and the
Mhm.
IT department. My IT department, a bunch of
Right.
crackerjacks who, really have kept the court afloat. So I'm very, very happy with them. And they're going to get hazard paid if I can help it.
Uh-huh. Well, that's great. That's amazing. So, Justice Acosta, since we're on the topic of staff, could you tell us about who your like immediate staff is? You mentioned you have a court clerk. Do you have more than one? What do you look for when you hire a court clerk, and what exactly do they do for the judge?
Right. Well, we have generally the Susana is the clerk of the court, Susana Rojas, and
Mhm.
Susana sort of traditionally has managed the operations of the court, and the presiding justice. Basically, she assists the presiding justice in
Mhm.
doing all of that, in creating systems. I have a chief of staff, Adam Horowitz, who also works with me, and it's just the three of us. You have a clerk's office that sort of is the front end of the court to the courthouse, and you have clerks, who are civil servants. They take exams.
Mhm.
A lot of, I mean, one of them is even a lawyer. So we have a lot of different, college graduates. There
Right.
always opportunity. I always tell college graduates it's always a good way to enter the legal system. You can just go to the website, the
Mhm.
Office of Court Administration, the Unified Court System website, because there are always positions available. So, we have court officers that protect the court. We have a central pool of lawyers that help. Remember, last year we handled 3,155 decisions. These
Wow.
are complex legal matters in criminal, family,
Mhm.
civil, surrogacy, commercial cases, you name it. So this is a very complicated process. You have a central pool of lawyers that deals with providing reports to the judges so that we can be very familiar with the cases that are being argued on top of the cases that on top of the cases that we are actually adjudicating. So
Great. So on the topic of staff there, are there any internship opportunities that perhaps undergraduate students could take advantage of, or are they mainly for law students?
no, one of the things that I've created at the appellate division is the I've been trying to instill in my judges, the need to make sure that, and I have great judges, by the way. I have the most diverse group of judges, now majority women. So there's down to 4 guys and 10 women. So it's really, diverse. And then, we have the most diverse, I mean, every category, as a Latino man judge, I run the court. I have, a Latina, Sally Mancenet. I have Asians, Jeff Oing, Asian Pacific, Anil Singh. We have LGBTQ community members. I think Raz Richter spoke with you
She did.
last year,
Yes.
and Raz is wonderful. Main problem is I'm going to lose her. She's retiring because she's going to start
Oh,
teaching at Columbia.
oh,
Uh,
wonderful.
yeah, so she's still gonna remain working with students. So part
Hmm.
of what we've done is I have a very committed group of judges who want to do work with undergraduates. I mean, part of my responsibility, I think, and my judges is to expose young people to the legal system so that you see how the sausage is made. I guess is one of the idioms I guess used. I want you to see how justice works. How do you make justice? So sometimes we talk very esoterically about, justice and about, this sort of as more of an intellectual concept. But doing justice is something that you actually do on a daily basis, whether it's dealing with an appeal on a housing matter, whether it's an appeal on a civil rights matter, including a woman who has been harassed in the workplace and is suing pursuant to the city human rights law, which I helped draft, by the way, when I was a lawyer in the city. Remember that I told you I worked in the Catch and Dinkins administration. Part of what I did was drafting a new city human rights law. That's probably the most protective uh, piece of civil rights legislation, which created a zero tolerance for discrimination, which put in systems to prevent. Um, Sorry about that.
No worries.
I thought I had turned it off. Um, so we have. So going back to having interns. We want to have exposure. We want you young people to have exposure to how we do things on a daily basis. So that this concept of justice is not something that you intellectually know it, but then when you in the street, you don't know what that looks like. Because that can be dangerous if you're encountering a member of the police department, or you're encountering other people and you don't know exactly how that process works, what it is what are your rights versus what are all the, what a police officer's responsibilities are, or, other ways, what a landlord's responsibilities are with respect to you being a tenant. So, I want young people to become familiar with these
Right.
concepts, so that they can, I think, one, impact the system in a way that I think it should be impacted. And it also keeps us in check when we're not, that's sort of the aspect of transparency that I always emphasize. I try to keep things as open in the courthouse. I provide reports, I write articles.
Yeah.
I deal with a lot of the tough issues in our society. So one of the questions you had was about diversity.
Yes.
If you saw that, if you look at the New York State Bar Journal this month, I wrote an article, an essay on the state of the judiciary in terms of diversity. We have, for example, 90 Latino judges out of over 3,500. We are 18% of the population, yet we only 8% of the
Right.
members of the judiciary. Women, the same thing. I told you we have a majority of women.
Right.
That's really downstate. If you look at in my court, if you look at trial level Supreme Court in Manhattan, the majority are women, a lot of people of color. But if you look at all the departments within the state, for example, the third and fourth department, which are upstate and in Western New York, the governor wanted to appoint a woman of color, or someone of color, for the third department. He had to actually appoint a judge from the Bronx, to go to Albany
Oh,
in order to get
wow.
diversity, because they didn't have a single woman of color or a
Wow.
single person of color in the third department. So those numbers are horrible. So part of what I did in that article, and I recommend that you read it, was
I
to sort
will.
of very starkly talk about numbers, because people say, oh no, I believe diversity is important. I think women should have their place in the workplace, and la da 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 da. And sometimes it's just rhetoric when it comes down to, okay, so does that mean that the African Americans, at least commensurate with the population of African American, women are more than 50% of the population? Do you have more than 50% women judges and staff members? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in other protected categories. So I think part of my responsibility, I mean, I'm the only one of color. As a presiding justice, you sit in this board called the administrative board. And the administrative board is comprised of the chief judge of the state of New York, and then the 4 presiding justices, which
Right.
includes me.
Right.
And I'm the only person of color there. So I feel I have a sort of the additional responsibility to make sure not only that there's transparency, but that, there's diversity in the decision, not just diversity in terms of how we look, but
Mhm.
I think diversity also has the ability to bring in people who think differently than
Yeah.
you. So our new lawyer, attorney Millet, is an African American woman of Cuban ancestry, and she has quite an interesting story. If you go to the OCA website, she will tell you like where her mother came from, her father came.
Mhm.
There's a podcast that tells you, and that's what we want. We want to make
Mhm.
sure that diversity is not just an abstract concept.
Right.
Diversity is in the grain of how you deliver justice, because we bring perspectives to the table that will not otherwise be considered by a very homogeneous group of administrators. So that's why I say, read that article, because I not only explain the nature of diversity and why diversity is important. It's just not so that you can have good looking people like all of us, right? It's more than that. It's not just looks and appearances. We have an experience.
Mhm.
Me as an immigrant, my immigrant experience impacts every decision that I make. You
Yes.
know, we have women here that bring their experience, the totality of who they are, to the decision making process, and that's important. So who you are, where you grew up, someone who grows up in mid America is someone who brings in a different perspective than someone who was born in Manhattan, you
Right.
know. So that's what I think diversity is the richness that comes out of that process of getting people who think differently, who look at the world very differently than your average. So that's, I think, what the ingredients that I think make for justice to be properly delivered, all of the elements of justice to be considered when it is being delivered. So that's I'll stop there.
No, that's amazing. And in fact, we're running short on time. I have one last question before we open it up to our students. What advice do you have for students watching today who want to maybe follow in your footsteps?
That's always a tough question. I mean, my advice to you is, one of the things, as a man of color, as an immigrant, um, I always dealt with. I always found myself in circumstances where I would always sort of question my abilities and the importance of what I bring to the table. And it was only later on, I mean, I think being an athlete helped a great deal, because it gave me a confidence in who I was and what I brought to the table that I think helped me, frankly, to cope with. I remember I tell people, I if I'm doing a jury trial, I mean, or making a presentation before a court when I was an attorney, it's a terrifying process. So you need something to uh, to give you the ability to go forward when your knees are shaking, right? And we all feel it. So part of what I did, I was always saying, listen, bottom of the ninth inning, bases loaded, 2 outs. You can do this. So it's sort of like the same pumping myself up that I did as an athlete, as a baseball pitcher. I was able to bring to the courtroom and use. Many of you have abilities, whether it's a painting, circumstances that you thought you could not overcome, and then you did. And that's what you sort of have to keep bringing up to yourself and saying, no, I have something important to say, and I want to say it. So how do you say it? How do you bring what you are and who you are to the table? A lot of it's fear. I'm not going to tell you that somehow you're not going to be fearful, and you're not going to have sort of that imposter syndrome that sometimes we all get. Oh my God, do I belong here? At Columbia, I was always, oh man, I thought I was prepared, graduating at the top of my class at DeWitt Clinton. And when I got to Columbia, every student was at the top of his class. So I'm
Mhm.
like, oh no, so everybody's smart here. So, it brings into question, am I as prepared? I mean, I remember, you know, and I don't want to go too long. I know time is short, but I remember how difficult it was. And I said, I can do this. I can not only play baseball, but I can also get good grades. And I did. So I graduated with honors from Columbia College. I still broke every Ivy League record as a pitcher. So I did well enough to attend Columbia Law School, where I also then had a class of 300 kids. They were all graduating with honors from Harvard, Columbia, Baruch, everywhere. So it's like, okay, so like, what do I do? Now I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So you're never the smartest guy in the room when you surround yourself with other smart people, which is great. But all I can tell you is what, if you boil it down to one element, for me, I was not the smartest guy in the room. I was smart. Don't misunderstand me. I think I got enough to be successful and be good at it. But I think what made the difference for me over students that were sometimes smarter than me was my work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it's, I mean, people ask me, oh, Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan and Robert Duval and David Duval, number one golf player a long time ago. Like, what makes the difference when you talk to those athletes, Larry Bird from basketball player,
Right.
the one key ingredient that you find is that they say, well, I know I was just as good as everybody else, but what brought you out? Well, you will find out that every time Tiger Woods is asked, well, how did you get that shot? I mean, that was like a magician. Well, no, I practiced that shot. I spent like 3 hours working on
Right.
that shot. Larry Bird, he said, well, how is it that you were the number one uh, foul shooter from the foul line? You foul, you take those shots. His percentage was like 90 something percent. Why? Well, I will be there at 7:30, 8 o'clock game. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he's there taking 200 shots.
Right.
Every day. And you say, like, 200 shots? Like, my arms will fall off if I do that. Everybody who has been successful, Gates from Microsoft, right? What did he do before he created? Microsoft was created in his garage.
Mm-hmm.
This kid, he and his friend, who are also the head of Microsoft, they're billionaires now. What was the difference? Their work ethic. They were playing around. They loved what they were doing.
Right.
So part of it is, you got to, sometimes the things that you need to do, like that math class for me is like not so much fun, but I knew I had to get a good grade in order to get into Columbia, in order to become a lawyer, in order to be able to do something with my life.
Right.
So, the things that you're forced to do, like take a course, like, what am I going to need math for? Like right now, when I need a math thing, I ask my IT people who are the smartest in the room. So, but you know what? I needed to get that A in the math class in order to be able to keep my grade point average to be able to get into Columbia, which is a tough place to get into. So you always, everybody's forced to do things and engage in activities that you don't necessarily think are conducive to, becoming a lawyer. Why do I need math to be a lawyer? I don't. Why do I need this to do that? But you do, because the idea is you're being tested. You're being given a very wide spectrum of skill sets and knowledge that you're then going to be able to use. You're never going to realize, for me, the core curriculum at Columbia was one of those things. What did Aristotle and Socrates and Plato have anything to do with being a lawyer? And then I found out, if you notice, I'm one of the ones that is always citing to John Locke and and treatise on civil government for the unremarkable proposition that there's a separation of power and the legislature is the most powerful of the three because they're closest to the people. You learn that from a 500-year-old, political philosopher. When I was taking it, I was like, why am I taking this thing? It's not even relevant to what I need to learn now. But it is all relevant. Every piece of information that you get is relevant, and you're going to be able to use it later on. Not all of it, like math, I only need it when I need to calculate my budget at home.
Well, that was great advice. You are so inspirational. I know we have at least one or two questions. I'll call on Tom Deep if you can unmute if you're still with us. You had a question that you put in the chat.
Yeah, so I know that you did a lot of baseball, but I was referring to more of any other extracurriculars or certain courses that you took in undergrad that helped you become successful in law school. And sort of feeding off of Anne Marie's question, specifically public interest, if you would.
Sure. It's I mean, it is one of the things that surprised me the most when I got to law school was that we had we had actually a medical doctor, we had engineers, we had English majors, political science major, etc. As an immigrant, as someone who did not grow up in the United States, I came at the age of 14. I knew that part of what I needed to learn was the American experiment with democracy. In the Dominican Republic, I grew up under the dictatorship of Trujillo for 31 years. He put my father in jail. There really wasn't much understanding about a legislative branch and a judicial branch and an executive branch. The executive branch ran everything. And anybody who did not agree with Trujillo would get killed. So when I came here, I said, I got to learn what the importance is of separation of powers. And in fact, I wrote a nice essay in the New York Law Journal, you should find it, on separation of powers, where I pay tribute to my father. Because for him, I said separation of powers is not an abstract concept. It's something that he lived with, something that he personally experienced, with a dictator. So for us, like, for example, understanding the check and balances that within our democratic experiment, knowing what the bounds of the executive, although you will know it from some of the things that are going on today, the bounds of what are the limitations of the executive branch, as powerful as it is? What are the responsibilities of the legislative branch? What does the judiciary do? What is the value of an independent judiciary? Why is it important that I make my decisions as a judge free of influence by anybody else? It's very important, because in other countries, the president will call the judge and tell them how to rule. Here, I have the pleasure of, I've been a judge now for 20 something years. I have yet to have one person trying to influence how I decide a case, other than the lawyers. The lawyers argue, and of course they want to influence judge, that other judge was wrong, you should reverse, etc. So to go back to your question, you want to be immersed in our system of government. What does a legislature do? How is a bill created? How does a law become law? A lot of those things are political science. Knowing economy is important, particularly when you considering what the economic consequences, for example, in the pandemic that we're in now. What are the president's responsibilities and powers? What are the governor's powers? Can the president override a decision of a governor to close or open a restaurant, as the president threatened as early as yesterday in Georgia? Or you got to open the churches. Well, First Amendment rights. Can the president force a governor to do that? I'm not going to opine on it because I'm a judge, but those are the kinds of issues. The more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are at saying, just because a law becomes a law doesn't mean that it's just. I mean, if you look at St. Augustine and the whole concept of an unjust law, and are you obligated to obey an unjust law? And you contrast, for example, Martin Luther King, who say you're not obligated, you fight an unjust law, but you got to be able to pay the consequences. So if you look at his papers from Birmingham jail, he spent time in jail paying the consequences of his beliefs that there was injustice in America. John Locke, for example, that same political philosophy I talked to you about before, felt differently. He thought that you're not under any obligation to obey an unjust law, rather than you can't do that because that's almost anarchy, right? if an unjust law is no law at all, is what he used to say. Well, in America, you can just decide for yourself, oh, that's a bad law. As bad as, look at all the laws that came out of, uh, 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 Plessy versus Ferguson was a judicial decision, right? That sort of uh, sustained and supported slavery and discrimination in America. So like, do you disobey it? Do you take the consequences for it? Martin Luther King thought it is an unjust law, and I'm going to, go on hunger strike, and I'm going to build a civil rights movement to fight against that kind of injustice. Those are the kinds of things that knowledge equips you. So that's my Reader's Digest version. The more you know about our system and how it works and how you can sort of impact it, the better off you are and the better lawyer you're going to become. I mean, there are people that become lawyers who don't even understand what justice means. So you got to fight against that and bring in your experience into it. And this is what happens when I encounter, even now as a presiding justice in the first department, if I try to hail a cab, they don't always stop just because I'm the presiding justice. They don't know who I am. They see me sometimes even in a suit, white shirt, dressed like a typical judge. I still have to deal with the consequence of bias, sometimes implicit bias, sometimes very explicit. Sometimes I have, when I used to campaign, I remember, I always tell the story, I would always campaign in my part of town, in a different part of town in Manhattan, right? The capital of the world. And sometimes you have women clutching their bag when they see me coming. So that happens. I'm a big guy, I'm 6'2". So sometimes people look at me and they make assumptions about what I am, who I am, whether I'm a threat to them or not. And so all of those are things that you bring to the table and are going to, in addition to studying John Locke and studying political science and our system of government, etc. So all of that is what makes you important in trying to, in becoming a lawyer. You bring more to the table than a lot of other people do. Remember that.
Justice Acosta, do you have time for one more question? We have another question.
Of course.
Okay, Ashley, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, Judge Acosta.
Hi.
I guess, first off, want to say how inspiring it is to see a Latino, especially a Dominican at your level. Like, my mom is from DR. She was born in Santiago and came over.
I'm from Santiago.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, so it's really inspiring. But my question is, like, you spoke about how diversity in thinking based on who you are and where you come from influences your decision-making process. So I want to know what other things drive your decision-making process as a judge. And my second question is, what was the most challenging case you've ever had to rule on, and what made it so challenging?
I mean, with respect to your first question, anybody, including a judge, who tells you that where they come from, their social status, their personal experiences, the system that they live under, whether they have parents or not, all of those things do not impact the decisions that they make on a daily basis, they're lying to you. Judges are no different than anybody else. How my experiences as an immigrant, your experiences as a young woman in our society, all of those are things that influence, that make who you are. That's the whole value of diversity. That's why I keep saying diversity is not an abstract concept. The reason that it is important to bring, for example, women to the table and being part of the decision-making process is because women have a different experience in society than men do. So if you exclude it from the decision-making process, you're going to have basically the decisions are going to be a lot poorer because they haven't been the decisions are not tested against the experiences and the values of others. So that's why I say, that's why the first department, I'm so proud of my court. It's not just a majority women. I told you the composition of my court. We have everybody, immigrants, people who grew up here, people who grew up in the South Bronx, people who grew up in Africa, people who grew up in Asia, people who grew up in Manhattan. We are everything. We are the capital of the world, and we should reflect that. Every court should do that, because when we have, say, a police encounter, uh, a decision that involves uh, a defendant or a young person or a person of color saying, "Oh, this is what happened. The police officer just threw me against the wall." I remember I've been in situations where one of the judges said, "Police officers don't do that." And my position is, where have you lived all your life? Are you kidding me? That's sort of part and parcel of having lived in the South Bronx and Washington Heights and encountering a member of, not all members of the police department. We have wonderful police officers who think like me, who act like me, who trying to do justice. But just like we have bad judges and we have bad teachers, we have bad police officers and we have bad everything. No industry has a monopoly on perfection, right? So that's why diversity is so important. You need diversity because your perspective on how an interaction take place, for example, is important. The story that you're hearing as a judge has to sound true in order for you to take the facts and apply the law to those facts. How you develop the facts depends sometimes on your experiences and your outlook. You know, a man would never say that to a woman in a workplace. I said, well, you haven't been a woman. And I've seen women judges pipe up and say, are you crazy? Like, where have you been for the last, 50 years? Of course, men say that to women in the workplace. When I was a human rights commissioner, I saw that on a daily basis. So I'm able to say, it doesn't mean that you need to be a woman in order to understand a woman's experience. Sometimes, I have sisters. I got 4 sisters who pushed me around for a long time. They still do. They still do. I have a wife. I got a daughter who's a lawyer. So I have a son who's a lawyer. So your interaction with people, is what determines, oh, yeah, that is plausible. Oh, no, that sounds unrealistic. Or you mean, you have this taxi complaint and the taxi did not stop, and that's why you filed a complaint with the Taxi and Limousine Commission. But that doesn't happen. Taxis always stop for everybody. And then my experience is a little different. And I'm sure that there are men of color who think differently about that. So all of those are things. That's what helps you dispense justice. So having a homogeneous group that only has one isolated experience doesn't help. Now, challenging cases. Every case is challenging. I mean, it's, we are in the first department. We deal with 3,001. Last year, we issued 3,155 appeals. Those are all challenging cases. They involve family law, child abuse cases. Those are the toughest for me. I lose sleep over most of these abuse cases, child neglect cases. You'll be shocked at, maybe not so shocked, depending on your experience, with what some adults do to children. Criminal cases involving all of the issues that I talked to you about police encounters, a car stop, what is the Holman was a case criteria that gets applied to a police encounter. All of those are things that we deal almost on a day, every time we sit. So those are all challenging cases. I got a lot of rewarding cases too. I've been able to, I told you before that I drafted the city human rights law together with staff members of mine back in the day, 1991. One of the things that I found when I became a judge 17 years later is that the law had, judges were still applying the law as if it had not changed. And they will say, city law, state law, and Title VII, which is a federal statute, says X. And I'm saying, like, no, it doesn't say X. What we drafted was purposefully distinct from state and federal law. So what I was able to do as a judge was interpret for the first time the city human rights law. So I did that in this Williams versus Housing Authority case. I've been doing that continuously. In fact, I got one decision coming up clarifying certain aspects of the city human rights law. So to me, that has been the most personally rewarding set of decisions, because it has changed the entire state. Now the Court of Appeals has adopted my position with respect to the liberal construction analysis of the city human rights law and how it was targeted to be different than state and federal law, more with a zero tolerance for discrimination. So that's a very rewarding thing when you're able to impact a whole trajectory, a whole area of the law. And many of my judges have done the same in certain areas. I have great judges. So
excellent. All right, so we've come to the conclusion of our program. I want to thank you so much. I want to thank our students. Very much great questions. I also want to thank Max Berger for making this possible. He provided a wonderful introduction to Justice Acosta for us, and he serves with Justice Acosta on Columbia's board. So I want to also thank him and for his generosity in providing the Max Berger pre-law program, and Justice, for your generosity of time and sharing all of your experiences with us. I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it.
Can I say something about Max? You know, Max is like a perfect example. He's a kid who grew up in the city, you know, Jewish background, right? Grew up in the city, seeing the consequence of lack of access to the system, became one of the best litigators. I mean, when Max argues, I recuse when he argues in the first department because we're friends, but I would never want to be at the other end of Max Berger. He's a great lawyer. And but he's a lawyer who really believes in justice. And you should see us when we debate. He and I are always on the same side on the board of Columbia Law School. And because we always, so here you have, you know, white Jewish kid, a Dominican, you know, brown immigrant, you know, sort of fighting for the same issue, and with a very similar perspective on justice. So I you know, I think Max walks on water as far as I'm concerned.
Wonderful. Yeah, we think very highly of him as well. And maybe one day when things go, quote, back to normal, we can visit you at the courthouse and view that beautiful building.
Oh, anytime. I would love to show you the courthouse, because I love to show it off. It's a beautiful, and I want people who generally, like, I never saw that courthouse until I became a lawyer. I want you to be able to see it and see how things work. Maybe we'll be able to work on some internships so that you can spend a little more time than usual there.
That you got a deal.
Yeah, when things come back to normal, though. It
sounds great. Thank you, Justice. Have a great day. I want to wish all of our students a great day. And for those of you who are joining us later, we're going to do a tour of Yale Law School later this afternoon, a virtual tour. So I look forward to seeing many of you back this afternoon. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.